London is hosting a global conference for media freedom. But on the very same day, attendees were enjoying appetizers at the opening party. Some 400 miles away, the UK government's lawyers were fighting for Britain's right to continue its surveillance of journalists. Polly Boyko picks up the story.
The British government, in conjunction with the Canadian one, is hosting the inaugural Global Media Freedom Summit here in London. Jeremy Hunt, the Foreign Minister and the man who spearheaded the idea for this big new conference, spoke at the event on its first day, and he talked about freedom of the press, and the conference was attended by hundreds of journalists and academics from around the world.
A free media both protects society from the abuse of power and helps release the full potential of a nation.
Governments in many countries are getting better at destroying the free press.
Signing pledges and making speeches is not enough. They must make sure that their laws respect media freedom.
Now, while those attending the government's Global Media Freedom event spoke about the importance of protecting journalism and journalistic sources, 400 miles away in Strasbourg, the European Court of Human Rights is hearing a case against the British government's mass data hoovering and retention practices, ones which affect journalists too.
Surveillance risks undermining the core values of the free and democratic societies.
Any alternative, as you put it, or combination of alternatives sufficient to substitute for the bulk interception power.
The case is against the UK's mass surveillance practices, the ones made public by the Edward Snowden revelations. Back in 2013, Edward Snowden blew the whistle on, among others, the UK intelligence agency's practice of intercepting and processing millions of people's private communications on a daily basis and sharing it with its allies' intelligence agencies. The case against the British government in Strasbourg is being brought by a group of non-profit organisations, including Amnesty International and the Bureau of Investigative Journalism. Last year, the lower chamber of the European Court of Human Rights ruled that UK laws on scooping mass data were unlawful and violated citizens' rights and freedom of expression. But the campaigners have asked the court to take the issue to the ECHR's Grand Chamber and are asking judges to go further by completely rejecting the UK mass public surveillance practices. Take a listen to Amnesty's Director of Litigation explaining why they've done this.
Exposed to the light of day, some of the UK's industrial-scale surveillance practices have already been found unlawful, but Europe's highest human rights court could now decide to entirely do away with dragnet surveillance and unfettered transnational sharing of millions of people's private data. We need to be protected from intrusive and overpowerful states that think nothing of secretly harvesting and sharing vast amounts of our private data and communications.
As it stands, the UK's Investigatory Powers Act, or the Snoopers Charter as it's known to many here, is the law that pretty much assumes that generally all our communication can sort of be hoovered up and stored. But don't expect a dramatic overhaul of this covert bulk surveillance programme if the ECHR rules that what the UK is doing is illegal. The UK government has lost a slew of court cases, albeit in smaller courts, about its bulk surveillance practices in recent years. And despite judges' rulings, nothing much seems to change.
Meanwhile, Brenda McPhail, who is Privacy Director at the Canadian Civil Liberties Association, told us more about the surveillance case.
We're in the court arguing that it's just never justifiable in a free democratic society where we value the rights to privacy and free expression to have an indiscriminate capture and potentially analysis of information for the millions of people who communicate on the internet and have never done anything unlawful or wrong. When we communicate with our international partners over the internet, our communications are going through the same pipelines as everyone else's, and those pipelines are being tapped and intercepted by the UK intelligence service. We started to wonder as human rights defenders whether or not our communications were being caught up in the bulk collection. And it turns out that, yes, Some of the groups who went forward with us, including Amnesty International and the Legal Resources Centre of South Africa, did have communications intercepted illegally.